Hello everyone, this is Greg Tong with Management Roundtable. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Apply Rapid Learning Cycles to Development. Our speaker today is Tim Schipper, who works in the Lean Management Office at Steelcase Inc. in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's where he coaches leaders and teams in the areas of lean product design, lean management systems, and business transformations. He's also on the board of directors of the Lean Product and Process Development Exchange, which is an international nonprofit group that promotes the exchange of lean information and techniques. Today's webinar, is provided in conjunction with the Lean Product Development Summit that will be held this August 19th and 21st on the beautiful Mackinac Island in Michigan. In addition to Steelcase, there will be presentations from companies such as 3M, Boeing, Gulfstream Aerospace, Motorola, and some others. For more information on the Lean Product Development Summit, please go to our website, managementroundtable.com. Back to today's webinar. Before we begin, I have a few quick housekeeping items to cover, so if I could please have your attention for a moment. For the best experience today, we highly recommend that you install the Adobe Connect add-in to your computer. If you are viewing the web, just click that and follow the prompts that say connect your computer, and you'll be installing the Adobe add-in. Another note that once the program has concluded, you'll see this on the slide as well at the bottom, we will be emailing to everyone a link to an online feedback form. We'd appreciate if you could take the time to fill that form out and let us know how we can improve our webinars. We'd greatly appreciate that. If you invited others to join you on this call, please forward the link to them as well when you receive that email so we can get everybody's feedback. And included as part of that, you will get a link to a copy of the slides used during today's presentation in PDF format and how to get access to the on-demand version of the webinar that you can share with others that weren't able to join us today. During today's session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. You don't have to wait until we pause to ask your question. You can do so at any time by typing it into the Q&A window that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Just type your question into there when it comes to you, and we'll try to pick up on it when we get to the Q&A portions of the presentation. Please remember that if you have your slides expanded to full screen, you will need to exit full screen mode to get access to the Q&A chat window. All right, it's time for us to begin with today's session. I'll turn it right over to our speaker today, Steelcase's Tim Schipper. It's all over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate the introduction. Welcome everybody to this Management Roundtable webinar, and I'm pleased to be able to speak to you today on some of the ways that we've introduced lean product development at Steelcase. I will be pausing for questions a few times during the presentation. I'll be displaying So the principal topic that we're talking about today is rapid learning cycles. So this is a topic that I've been very interested in for quite a long time. I've been at Steelcase in the role of either engineering or in IT or as a lean coach for 30 years, which is a long time to be in one company, I realize, but I've been able to do a number of different things. The last 10, 11 years I've been working in the area of lean. And we've been working in the area of lean in the office and more pertinent to this discussion, specifically lean in development. Just a little background on Steelcase to get us started. Steelcase is an over 100-year-old company. It's a publicly traded company. For many of those years it was privately held, but then it went public. We're about $2.8 billion US annually in sales. We do our sales through roughly 650 dealers around the world. And we also have a presence on the web. You can find us at store.steelcase.com. We have a major show every year where we show new products. This picture that you're seeing is from our NeoCon 2013 show. And it's highlighting a lot of the different types of products we make. Obviously, we make products for the office, but we are also more and more integrating technology with our products. So in this picture, you see kind of a three-dimensional telepresence type room where we're integrating both furniture and technology together. And our motto at Steelcase is, love how you work. And we have over 10,000 employees around the world, and we have a presence in North America and in Europe. We also have manufacturing facilities in the Far East, in China, and Malaysia. So really, we are more and more a global company, and we also have development offices in 3 different regions of the world, which I'll be talking about in a little bit more detail as we talk about lean product development. So today I am talking to you about topics that are primarily coming out of a book that I wrote with Mark Swets, who's one of my colleagues here at Steelcase. And this book came out from Productivity Press in 2010. It's available from Productivity Press or on Amazon.com. And the book is called Innovative Lean Development. And it was our attempt to document a part of lean development that at that point in time was not very documented or well written or even on the internet. And we wanted to introduce some of the topics of how do you build this idea of rapid learning cycles into your development process. So Mark and I do speak on this topic occasionally at various conferences, and we're pleased to be involved with the conference coming up in Mackinac Island, which is organized by Bart Husthwaite and the Husthwaite Innovation Institute. This is a really great conference for both personal development, but also learning about topics around this area of lean product development. I often think of this conference as much as a think tank as it is about going and listening to speakers, because it really is an interactive event, and we get deep into a lot of the issues around lean product development and lean design within your own company and what it takes to actually put together a lean design program. So again, that conference is coming up in August. If you've never been to Mackinac Island, it's absolutely a fantastic vacation spot to visit. And so it's a nice blend of going to a really interesting and fun place, but also going deep on a subject that will benefit you as you go back to the office. So I invite you to attend that conference with us. The little background on lean development and how we started at Steelcase. We really have 2 primary drivers for lean development. The first one was a situation in IT where we were rolling out SAP to our various plants. SAP was running our business systems, our financial systems, our order entry system. But then we also wanted to roll it out to our manufacturing plants and actually run our plants on those systems. And we attempted our first plant, and that plant was one of our chair plants. And lo and behold, when all was said and done, it took about 20 months to get SAP into that plant. And we said, you know, that's way too long. That's, with the number of plants that we have to implement, we'll be at this for over a decade if we have to do things at that pace. So we had a need to change how we approach that development process. Same thing happened in our product development area. In one of our categories that actually, if you look in this picture, is the one that manufactures our office accessories. So there you see keyboard shelves, items to house papers and pencils, but also these monitor arms, which is called the EyeSight monitor arm. So those types of products were taking us 24 to 48 months to develop, and we wanted to get that down to around the 12-month window or less. So we really needed a different process beyond our phase gate development process. And it's from these 2 areas that we really started to look at putting learning cycles and this idea of rapid prototyping into our system. So what is lean development? If I think about lean development, I think about it as a type of system thinking. And when we talk about systems, you think about an automobile. An automobile obviously is a complex system. It has many components. It's made up of multiple subsystems, everything from the engine to the transmission to the steering. the braking system, even the environmental comfort system. These are all subsystems that have to work together. And so in lean development, really takes systems like that and we break them down. And we actually measure the value within these systems based on how well they perform the attributes that they need to perform. And in lean development, we're really trying to optimize the value equation. So we're optimizing value, and at the same time, we're trying to minimize waste. And as we do this, we're obviously trying to innovate our products as well. And so we're trying to create products and methods of processing those products that are as innovative as possible. All of this means that we bring a lot of knowledge to the table when we develop our products. And so many people have called this lean development process really a knowledge-based development cycle. So what we're trying to do is take these different things, this value equation, innovation, and knowledge-based development, and we're trying to put those together and do that in a very rapid way, using rapid learning cycles. I put this little picture of the Volkswagen Beetle on the screen because this is a nice little story that talks about the value versus waste optimization problem. You know, in the Volkswagen Beetle, if you've seen any of these going down the road, it has a value which is promoting safety, and that's that the headlight is always on, both headlights are always on. But if you've also noticed Volkswagen Beetles going down the road, you might notice that one of those headlights might be off. And the reason is that the headlight bulb is very difficult to change. In fact, the way to change the bulb is you have to get way underneath the hood and release a clip. That's very hard to get at, and it's very takes a lot of force to release it. And then the whole headlight canister comes out of the front of the vehicle. And then once you get the headlight canister out, then you can replace the bulb. So whereas it's optimizing a value for safety, which is to keep that headlight on at all times, it also has waste involved. So here we have a waste of complexity because it's very difficult to change the bulb. It takes some specialized knowledge on how to change the bulb. And because it's difficult to do, many people don't even try to do it themselves. They only have the dealer do it or the mechanic do it. In fact, the mechanic who services the Volkswagen Beetle my daughter owns won't even touch the headlights. He said, it's too labor intensive. I don't even want to change the bulb. Take it to the dealer. So there's added cost. So this is just this tension that we always feel in development, right? So there's this value equation where we have to optimize the value, but you have to watch out for the drivers of waste. So that's the intent around lean development. So we talked a little bit about the Steelcase lean journey for a few minutes, and then we'll get a little deeper into this topic of learning cycles. Steelcase implemented lean in manufacturing back in 1996, and we continue to do lean in manufacturing even today through all of our plants and also at many of our suppliers. We started lean in the office as a program in 2005, and we continue that to this day. We've been educating our office staff, both in Grand Rapids and also in our global business centers around the world about lean in the office. And so if you were to visit Steelcase, you would see many examples of lean principles used in the office, things like problem solving and visual controls and value stream mapping and other things. As I was mentioning before, the SAP problem first surfaced in 2003, and that's when we started to apply lean principles to IT development and started to use learning cycles and other techniques in our IT program. And then shortly after that, focused on lean and development in around 2005, which is about the time when I first also attended the conference on Mackinac Island and really started to learn about many of these principles and how to apply them at Steelcase. So from 2005 to 2009, we did a lot of pilot teams. We tried smaller projects, tried to get some organic growth by looking at small projects, trying to create a success around lean development, and then trying to leverage that success by applying that to other teams. After doing that for several years, in 2009, we actually created a lean product development program, which was a much more ambitious effort. In this program, we first trained all of our development leaders in engineering, industrial design, and project management. We did some book studies, did some attending of conferences and other things to really try to educate the leadership on what lean product development is. And then we started to roll this out by the product development leaders to our development staff in North America, EMEA, and also Asia Pacific. The idea here is that the foundation of a lean system is really within the leadership team. And this actually goes all the way back to some of the Toyota teaching, where the leaders are the mentors, the teachers, and the coaches. And so we really trained our leaders to be the trainers, and they went out and trained our folks in North America and in Europe and in Asia. So that launched our lean product development program in a larger way around the globe. We have our developers using a lot of the principles. And on an ongoing basis, we will do refreshing trainings in new developers. So that's an ongoing effort. In fact, just completed another session. But because we had some of those longer cycle times in development, our goals were to learn faster, to increase our speed through development, and as I've mentioned, to have leaders as coaches, and also to become better problem solvers. But really at the heart of development is the idea that all developers need to be these innovative problem solvers. We're seeking to optimize the value equation. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're trying to maximize our product value and minimize the drivers of waste. So with that introduction, just a quick break here to see if there's any Q&A. In a few minutes, I'm going to get into a story about how we applied lean development at Steelcase and then some of the principles.
Just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, just type it into the Q&A window that is below, or you can use the chat window and we'll find that there as well. You don't have to wait until we pause, just so you can ask your question anytime. I'll start off, Tim, just a quick question. You have a very much a lean culture at your organization now. Just wondering, how does this affect your hiring process? Does it change who you look for as employees?
It will affect certain skill sets that we're looking for. Certainly a benefit if they have lean knowledge, or now at schools, universities, colleges, you'll see a lot of lean taught, but typically that's coming out of the business schools, not so much out of the engineering schools. So typically it's harder to find people with lean product development education. With that said, the other thing we will do is we will hire people who can become facilitators and are lean thinkers. And what we have found works well in our lean implementation is to put some change agents or some leaders of change who understand lean into various areas of the business. So we will be doing that.
Okay, we do have a question from the audience, from Karen Adamson, who's asking, how or if do you combine lean product development principles with design thinking? And are there synergies or tensions between the two?
That's a great question, Karen. A little known fact for us is Steelcase is very connected to IDEO, and IDEO was actually owned by Steelcase for a number of years. IDEO is now being sold back to the IDEO employees, so to speak. But we've got a close link with IDEO and design thinking, and in a few minutes I'll be talking about this idea of rapid learning cycles, and I don't think I have the slide in here of how it relates to design thinking, but I'll talk a little bit about that at that point in time. But there is a a pretty strong link to the design thinking methodology. And if you think about the design thinking circle that's been documented by Tim Brown, for instance, in Harvard Business Review, it's a great article back in 2008. If you want to go back and look at it in Harvard Business Review, he talks about the design thinking cycle. And this idea of going back and observing and looking at true user behavior, and then diving deep into multiple aspects of the design, and then also rapid prototyping. Those are all concepts that marry up really, really well with the rapid learning cycle method. So I'll mention it here, but I'll also touch on it again in a few minutes.
Okay, we have two questions from two different people that are both related to how you deal with leadership. We all know that nothing really happens in a company without good leadership support. So some people are asking, who was the first leader at Steelcase who was influenced to adopt Lean, and also, what was the focus on your leadership training? What do you focus on when you train leadership on these methods?
Okay, two great questions. So the first leadership champion, if you would, at Steelcase was a gentleman named Mark Baker. He was a vice president in manufacturing, and that was back in, he joined Steelcase in about 95, and he was with Steelcase for at least a dozen years, and in that time really drove the thinking of Lean into manufacturing and the principles of Lean in manufacturing. And when we got into the product development world, then we really tapped on our chief engineer, Kurt Heidman, and one of his directors, Wendy Herner, and they were really instrumental in helping us lead that change in product development. And what do we teach them? Basically, we teach them the same tools that you would learn as a developer or as a manufacturing engineer or as a plant associate. But we're also then teaching them about the behaviors we expect for leaders and some of the coaching opportunities that they'll face as leaders and some of the things that they'll need to do to promote Lean within their organization.
That looks it for questions in this section, so why don't we keep going, Tim?
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, at Steelcase at our Lean journey, we're certainly always trying to optimize this value equation, maximize the product value, and minimize the drivers of waste. So just as a kind of a story to relate how this actually works, I'd like to focus on a couple products. And the products are kind of a midpoint in our offering. So in our offering, we're looking to promote values like being interconnected, being able to collaborate globally, being mobile, and also working wherever you are, this idea of a mobile worker. And so what we really needed is some type of thinking model or innovation techniques that help us define new business attributes. So when we talk about new initiatives, we're looking at how do we study those, how do we do user observation to actually understand them in more depth. And then as we innovate around them, we really want to close the gap between what it is that we don't have and what it is we need to do. So one of the techniques we have used is the technique that Bart Huthwaite teaches at the Mackinac Island Conference, which is this idea of defining the user needs and values, and then to look at outside thinking, how other people have done it, and also looking at hindsight, how people have done it in the past, and then also generating as many ideas as we can to fit that sweet spot in the middle. So as an example, I would go back to a product we did just not that long ago, about 2-3 years ago. That's a product called Vivi. It was a product for kind of a mid-market, and we wanted to hit certain value points that we weren't hitting in the past. So this was an insight-driven approach where we were really looking at our insights of how office workers needed to work in this environment. And one of the things that we found is that the bench environment where people sit together at a bench is really a a great technique that is used in a lot of startups and small businesses, and we really wanted to hit that market with a new product. So we also wanted a product that was very usable. So the usability was a factor, and we wanted to create a product that had modularity so that we could do this at a lower cost. We also had to address the deliverability value. So we had to get this product to market in basically flat boxes because it wasn't going to go out on the nice big blue steel case trucks anymore. This was going to go out, FedEx and other ways. And then we also needed to address the affordability. So we needed to have a cost target that was able to be afforded by small to middle businesses, and yet it still had to have that steel case pedigree of quality. So with it, we offered a 5-year limited warranty on this product and also free shipping through FedEx. But obviously that had to drive a lot of the innovative design that went into this product so that it actually could be shipped knocked down in boxes. And the other thing we wanted to create was the value of wowability, if you would. We wanted people to be very much, I'm sorry, I just lost my screen. Okay, sorry. We very much wanted to have people to be amazed at the number of different settings that they could actually configure with this furniture. So here you see anything from an office of 1 all the way up to a shared table for a team of 6 people. And you could actually do conferencing for up to 12 people. Because it uses the same leg structure and same connection means. And then we also wanted to create a system that was discoverable on the web. So discoverability was a key value for us. And the idea that, even if you just had a napkin sketch of what you wanted to do as a small business owner, you could go to the iPad and actually sketch out an office and use that as the entry point for the order for this. So this was a departure from our normal dealer network of having to go to a dealer and work with a dealer to lay out the office and then specify the furniture and purchase it. So it's a very different market for us. And then we also wanted to provide stories so that we could communicate these different settings. And so we, on the website for this, actually showed different settings of offices where companies had, in fact, used this furniture and configured it in ways to fit their particular business needs. So it's a place to go and learn. And of course, for Steelcase, it had to be sustainable. So sustainability was another value. So really what happened in this particular project is we went through all these different values way up front before the product was ever designed. We talked about the value equation, talked about how to maximize these values I talked about, but also minimize the wastes that might enter into the value stream if we didn't design them out from the start. So this was a kind of a major project in a new business area for us to launch. And then we also into rapid learning cycles. So in this method, we're really trying to innovate, trying to test more often. Ideally, you're testing in every learning cycle, so that every learning cycle is both a design and a prototype build and then a test. And that allowed us to learn faster and generate knowledge faster. The other thing we're trying to do in rapid learning cycles is push multiple concepts forward at one time. And so one of my favorite stories from that particular project is they set up a large room and they had all sorts of different ideas on how to achieve those values I talked about for this product. And when they actually went through and mocked up those different options. They had them all in the room at the same time. So you could actually walk around the room and see different ideas or different methods of trying to achieve those values. And then we could evaluate those different concepts against each other to see how well we were doing at achieving the values and driving out some of the wastes that we thought we might encounter in the value stream. So, you know, the rapid learning cycle anatomy, if you would, is a way to look at how to attack problems when you don't know the outcome. That's really the process of discovery. One person described it as, you know, a way to know what you don't know. And so Al Ward was one of the first ones to document rapid learning cycles in his book, Lean Product and Process Development. If you haven't picked up that book, I would encourage you to do so. It now has a second edition, which is really good. And what Mark Swetz and I did when we wrote Innovative Lean Development, we were really interested in pulling out one of these aspects from Al the look, ask, model, discuss, act cycle. And as we did it at Steelcase, and as others have done it, you know, we said really what's going on here in the look and ask phase, you're planning, you're exploring the problem, and you're trying to structure the learning cycle. And then in the model portion, you're trying to design and build, and you're also proposing different plans, or you know, plan A, plan B, plan C, of how you would achieve what needed to be learned. And then you were doing the testing, and then reviewing the results, and then repeating the cycle. So out of these learning cycles, the key is that you're generating knowledge. In fact, Al Ward called it the knowledge cycle often. And so what we're looking for in a rapid learning cycle is how can you rapidly prototype and move through things to actually create knowledge. So here's a little bit more detailed view of that. I don't know if you can see all of the words on here so clearly, but the learning cycle involves planning. So in the beginning, you need to innovate across the domain, something that Bart Huswick talks about in his work. You know, you're innovating across the design domain, the customer domain, the supply chain domain, and then you know, tying those together. You're also going through and defining what you're going to accomplish in a learning cycle, listing questions, and then defining the tasks that have to happen. Then you go into a design mode, and then this is very close, I would say, to the design thinking method as well, if you know, for the earlier question asked by Karen. So you're going into observation mode, you're looking at the systems and how they have to interact together. You're talking about the methods that you're going to use to get the answers, and you're trying to really gather and refine requirements. I think it's a fallacy that as developers we all fall into, and that's the fact that we think we're going to have all the requirements up front. And so often that's just not true. We don't have all the requirements up front. We have to uncover and refine the requirements as we go along. And then after thinking about different concepts and ways to do this, then you go into a prototyping phase. And so in the design thinking approach, and if you came to Steelcase, you would see the same thing here, and at many companies, this idea of a lot of prototyping. Prototyping can be anything from a very low resolution prototype to a more refined prototype, something you might get out of 3D printing or some other technique. But this idea of building some type of prototype in each learning cycle, no matter what level of prototyping it is. You know, IDEO talks a lot about their bicycle shop mentality, where if they're going through what they call a ideas on how to achieve a concept, and then actually prototyping and building some type of object that demonstrates that. And then you go through a testing cycle to make sure that you're trying to hit the mark for those. And then the last step is to review the knowledge that comes out of that. So at this stage, this is where you are summarizing the learning. What did you learn? You're capturing the knowledge, and I'll show you an example in a few minutes about how you might capture knowledge. This is a great opportunity to give management updates. Management update would actually be having the leaders write in the learning cycle review so they can learn and see what the team has done and learned right alongside. And then also at this point, it's a great time to measure your various concepts against those original values and against the waste you were trying to eliminate. And that's something that you can use the Innovation Cube for. It's something you would learn about at the conference on Mackinac Island. So again, I mentioned prototyping. This is really key in rapid learning cycles. So in the IDEO design thinking methodology, sometimes these are really low resolution prototypes. It can almost look like games or like a craft project, if you would. It's just ways to express the idea of what it is you're trying to do. But you're not just doing it in PowerPoints. You're not doing it in just a talk or a discussion. You're actually doing it with physical objects. And then you move to more of a bicycle shop mentality where we do use a steel case. A lot of companies do. I'm amazed at the revolution in 3D printing. You know, everything from things that you can wear to things that you can use on the water like a kayak. And I just saw on the internet this morning, people are now 3D printing houses in a matter of just hours or days. Small structures that people can live in. And then as you get further down your refinement in these concepts, you're going to get more into rapid tooling or low cost, low quantity of run type of tooling. So we'll use all of those techniques in our rapid learning cycles. By the way, these also work in IT. In IT, you can go through the same type of prototyping and the same type of rapid learning cycles. You can do some really low resolution type prototypes where you might just be showing what the screens will look like as you have drawn them on a whiteboard. And then you might move on to quick user interfaces using tools like PowerPoint or some other drawing program. And then you get into coding and actually user testing. But the important part is in every case in an IT rapid learning cycle, you're getting the user involved and getting that feedback to understand how they would view the actual end result. So again, that was quite a bit of information. I went through it quickly, so I thought it'd be good at this point to see if there's any other questions before we move on.
We'll pause just a moment to give you some time to type in your question if you have one. Tim, I just was wondering, how often does it happen that you have a major course change in the middle of a learning cycle? Does it happen at all? Never? Often?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, just like in manufacturing, they talk about flow interrupters. A flow interrupter would be, you're running the line at its design speed. The same thing happens in development. And these flow interrupters come in all sorts of shapes and forms. It could be a new requirement for marketing that suddenly comes in. It could be something that somebody saw on the internet. It could be something that a customer said. It could even be something that the management team interjected. And so you have all these flow interrupters. So one of the things that we've tried to teach is, at least for one learning cycle, and again, a learning cycle is meant to be a relatively short burst. It could be maybe 3 weeks long, 4 weeks long, something like that. Sometimes only a week or two. But during that learning cycle, try to hold off all the flow interrupters. Let the team complete that particular study and generate that knowledge, and then document it and move on. And then at the end of the learning cycle, that's your chance to stop and reflect and say, okay, what else do we know? What other things have been mentioned that we now should think about considering, and maybe we have to change the plan for our next learning cycles. So that's been a technique that's worked fairly well. It doesn't matter what project you're in, you're going to get those types of flow interrupters.
So how do you really make sure that the end of the learning cycle
With a knowledge capture. So the idea is at the end of the learning cycle, that's your opportunity to capture the knowledge. That's when you should be documenting it. The idea is to actually share the knowledge on an A3, not in a PowerPoint, so that it's buried within a slide deck, and to actually display those physically within the project space so that you can go back and refer to it. So that's one of the ways that we have found effective to actually make sure that knowledge is being generated. And then to actually reuse it, you have to put it in some type of knowledge repository or knowledge management system.
Right, another question on learning cycles from our audience. Are the teams involved in learning cycles focused solely on each individual project? For example, do you clear calendars to execute a learning cycle?
That's a great question. We've done it both ways. We have had team members working on 1 or 2 or 3 learning cycles simultaneously. But we've also, on occasion, especially in IT, created what we call a Blitz Week, where we clear everybody's calendars and go into, at least for that team, making sure that they are totally available and dedicated to that learning cycle. That you can't do for a long period of time, so those are typically 1-week bursts of time.
Okay, one more question before we move on. Someone's asking, how early do you bring in the supply chain considerations, and when do you shift the focus from designing for the user to designing for manufacturability?
Yeah, great question. So as I mentioned, one of the 4 domains is that supply chain or operational domain. You have to bring in suppliers, and you have to bring them in fairly early, especially if you're planning to do a lot of your manufacturing within your supply base. And that is a challenge because if you think about how we're used to dealing with our suppliers, we're used to giving them a full specification, perhaps a full set of engineering drawings, and having them go off and quote what it would take to manufacture or build something. And so we're asking for a little bit of different behavior. We're asking them to be included in some of the upfront design. So that's a different arrangement, so to speak, with your suppliers, more of a partnership with your suppliers. And as far as manufacturability, again, you're trying to bring in those drivers of waste earlier and earlier into the process. And so having an actual manufacturing resource on the team is a great way to start thinking about those things early.
All right, Tim, why don't we move on from there? Just a time check. We do have about 15 minutes left of the session.
Okay, great. So just a few words about bringing rapid learning cycles into your development process. This little diagram is attempting to show if you have a long development phase where you're developing and prototyping, the idea is to divide that into subsystems that you can bring into a learning cycle. You list your objectives for a learning cycle, and then you frame the questions you want to answer in the learning cycle, and then you actually go through the learning cycle where you do the planning, the designing, building, the prototypes, testing, and then reviewing the results. At the end, that's when you capture the knowledge. And to Greg's question earlier, you noticed you allow flow interrupters only at the end of learning cycles. So in your ideal state, you let each learning cycle complete its work, generate its knowledge, and you don't let flow interrupters in. You may keep them on a parking lot board, a whiteboard, but you try not to let them into the cycle. The idea is that you front-load the development process, try to get a better quality design up front, and then your ultimate goal is you have a faster execution process and less rework at the end. As I mentioned, capturing that knowledge, the kind of assumed almost a way to do this is a knowledge A3. This is a technique that's used throughout Lean. The A3 is just a paper size. It's a metric paper size. And the idea is to kind of dump your PowerPoint and use an A3 to communicate a body of knowledge. Why an A3? Well, it's a good size sheet for capturing a lot of information, yet it still makes you whittle down the amount of information that you can share. And it's also a good communication device because it's easily read and you can quickly see everything on the page. Here's just an example from Steelcase. We actually did some thought about what happens ergonomically to the human body as we age, because one of our brands is the Nurture brand for the healthcare market. And obviously, more and more people in the hospital would be, upper in their age group as far as the population goes. And so we were interested in what actually happens to the human body. Has anybody documented how much the human frame, if you would, or skeleton shrinks? And so the good news is we captured it. The bad news is we all are going to shrink about 3.5 inches over our lifetime. This is just one example of a knowledge A3. The idea is we put this in a knowledge A3 library so you can go back and refer to it in the future. So the ultimate goal here in learning cycles is trying to separate learning from execution. So try to separate learning out of your phase gate process. So if you're using a phase gate waterfall process in development, try to get and divide that up into learning cycles. So here's another view of what that looks like. If you're looking at a concept phase and a development phase that might run 10 months, and an implementation phase that runs 6 months, you're trying to plug in as many rapid learning cycles as you can during that concept and development phase. There's a couple ways to do that. One is you can plan them out linearly, like this is showing, where your early learning cycles are kept relatively short. And as you get into your later phases, you let them grow a little bit in length because typically your prototypes are getting a little bit more involved. You're moving from those low resolution prototypes to higher resolution and maybe even some tool parts later on. But the idea through all of this is that you are also looking at multiple concepts, keeping multiple concepts alive, and narrowing those as you go along through these learning cycle periods. And Lean product development terminology is called set-based design, where you're trying to keep multiple concepts alive and seeing which ones play out as you go along. And then it's a good idea to block out your project plan based on these learning cycles and how you're going to get to the execution phase. But you also might have a view that looks something like this, where you have multiple learning cycles by sub-teams going on in parallel. And they may be learning at a different pace or at a different cadence. So here, sub-team 1 has a 2-week learning cycle, a 3-week learning cycle, and a 5-week learning cycle. And another sub-team might have a 3-week, a 3-week, and a 4-week. The idea is when you have different sub-teams working on different aspects of the design, it's fine to let them go off and crunch through their learning cycles that they need to do, but then you have to bring those back to an integration event or a system build where everybody has to be there on that date. You set the date, you don't let anybody miss it, and you also have them bring their prototypes or bring their parts to the party, so to speak, and actually do a trial build. So this is the idea of integration events, which is one of the key concepts. So as a kind of a summary, this is kind of highlighting the difference between traditional project management and learning cycles. I don't necessarily go through all of these, but traditional project management is focused on what to solve. In a learning cycle, we're focused on how to solve it. Traditional project management has just a few toll gates or phase gates. In learning cycles, we want to have many, many learning cycles and multiple integration events along the way. In project management, we break down tasks. In learning cycles, we break it down by problems or things that need to be learned. In traditional project management, you plan globally what resources you need, but in learning cycles, you're really focused on what are your immediate learning cycles. So there's quite a different flavor between traditional project management and interjecting learning cycles that might be a little uncomfortable for the organization, and you have to work towards making that happen. So that kind of wraps it up. So any final questions or comments?
As a reminder, just type your question into the Q&A window below, and we'll try to pick up on that. We'll give you a moment to type those out as well. Tim, just another quick question about set-based design practices. Do you need additional resources at the beginning of the set-based design process to get out enough sets of designs, or is it you have one team working on that and they produce everything at the beginning and through the end?
Yeah, a couple of things on that. Typically, when we're talking about learning cycles, we're talking about front-loading the development process with additional resources. And as you talk about lean product development in general, to read the literature and some of the authors on it, they will talk about this need to apply some new resources or additional resources up front. So that's a key thing. But the idea is that's when you can most influence the design. The biggest waste in product development is the loop back. And that's when you get all the way down to the end of development. Perhaps you're already tooling products, and then you discover hidden requirements or things that were missed, and then you have to loop back. That's the number one waste in development. And there have been some studies done on this, and that can be as high as 80%, especially in IT projects. So that's what we're trying to avoid by putting resources earlier.
Okay, we have a question here from Bob who's asking, do you have a core team in place to facilitate learning cycle events, or do you expect each team to self-facilitate? You might have talked about this a little bit before, too.
Yeah, really, we're trying to build that skill into the teams. So there's no core team or roving team to facilitate these. Really, it's teaching the principles and then asking the teams to do those principles.
Do you have like a mentoring process in place to make sure that you populate the next series of facilitators?
Yeah, certainly. Again, we're looking for the leaders to be the coaches and the teachers and promote that. So that's a technique that's certainly expected of the leadership team. And then you can use the technique of teams can learn from each other as well.
Now, Steelcase is a little unique in that you've focused your lean improvements in many different areas of the business. Is there one in particular you would say was easier or harder than the others, and where the people are more receptive or less receptive in different business areas?
Well, certainly lean is easiest in manufacturing. You can see the waste. You can go out to the value stream and you can see the inventory, or you can see the delay, or you can see the operator that's not busy. You can see the flow. You can see the product. When you get into the office, it's very hard. Everything's hidden. Everything's in the computer screens. So it takes a lot more effort to look at the value stream and actually make it lean. And the same thing would be true in product development. So it would be harder in product development than in
Again, from Karen, who's asking, what did you do to shift the expectations of the decision makers and management around what happens when? Because I guess the process you've implemented, as you've pointed out, is very different from traditional development processes, different counts, timeline.
Yeah, right. That's a great question, actually. As you plan out learning cycles, what you're really looking for is what is the missing knowledge, or what are the knowledge gaps. And if you look at some of the studies that have been done on lean scheduling in development, there's an interesting project at Phillips, and actually the young woman who did this was at the Bart Huthwaite Mackinac conference a couple of years ago. She talked about lean scheduling, and in the lean scheduling world, she showed how it's just as important to flag what decisions have to be made when, as it is to talk about what you're going to learn. And in lean development, we'll talk about last responsible moments. That's also very important. So, mapping out the decisions and when they need to be made is a critical technique in lean product development.
Okay, it looks like we may be out of questions, so maybe a good time to end here. If you have additional questions for Tim, maybe you can contact him afterwards, and he'll be able to answer any follow-up that you may have. There was a question earlier about if slides were going to be made available. We did announce at the beginning of the session. You're going to get an email that takes you to our feedback form, so we can get your input on how we did today's webinar. And at the end of that, you'll get links to a copy of the slides that you can download and a link to the on-demand version of today's webinar if you want to watch it again or share it with a colleague. I'd like to give our big thanks to Tim for joining us today. Again, if you're interested in the Lean Product Development Summit that was mentioned on Mackinac Island, you can get information on that on managementroundtable.com. We thank all of you for joining us today. Please, as I mentioned, remember that we will be sending you that email to our online evaluation forum that will have directions for how to get the slides and the on-demand recording. Please forward that to everyone in your group that joined you today so we can get everybody's feedback. We'd greatly